Hi all. I'd like to do a video on screenwriting, uh, writing movies, writing a script. I put together this text file to make sure I hit on a few topics that I wanted to talk about. So it's not just script writing, it's more or less an intro to the business of script writing, of screenwriting. And I'm mainly going to talk about how to write a movie, but I suppose it would apply to writing for TV or writing books, but mainly I'm talking scripts. Right off the top, I'd like to say I'm no expert on the topic, but I started following it back around 1995, just a little bit here and there. Back in the 90s, I was into the music thing, writing songs and things like that, and that led me to start paying attention to the music in movies. And then that led me to scripts. And so now that I'm into the YouTube thing, I just like to pass on a few of the tips that I picked up. I watched a few videos here and there about it, and there's some great information on YouTube, but nothing really ties it all together. So I think going through this text file will kind of tie things together for you, at least from my point of view. So we'll go ahead and pick through this. This isn't a comprehensive text file on how to write. I'm just going to point you to certain things that I've bumped into. Books and magazines that I think might be good, might help you to learn how to write a script. So of course, with some of the other videos I've done, I've also gotten carried away with this one, and so far I've got 33 points, so I'll probably break this up into multiple videos, maybe 20 minutes each. I'm gonna try to record it all at one time, but then I'll break it up into 4 or so videos, so it's not just one big video. Okay, so before we get started, I want to start with a joke. This is the book World's Book of Best Jokes by Eddie Cantor. It's an old book. I got it at the library on the free rack. That's something else I like to do. I want to be a stand-up comic. So, 1943. You can tell it's a real old book. There's different sections. So here's a section on love, and one guy is talking to another guy, and he says, "Are you gonna take your girl to the movies?" And the other guy says, "We don't have to go to the movies." And the first guy says, "Why not?" And then the second guy says, "Her mother and father are going out." Okay, so, if you're going to write a script, they're 120 pages, double spaced. You can do it in Word if you want to. You can do it in Notepad if you want to. I've got a few samples here, in case you've never seen one. Here's You've Got Mail. Let's see, I'll make this a little smaller so you can see it. So this would be the title page. Okay, so you can see it's 132 pages. This would be the first page. You see they add these little things, fade in. They have a little paragraph on what's going on. And then down here they have the dialogue. This person says this person says this. Okay, so I'll upload this stuff and you can check it out. You can go out on the web and search for scripts yourself. Toward the end of the file, I have a website that has a lot of scripts on it, but you can find them all over the place. What I like to do is I go to Yahoo Advanced. And then you can search for some script here. Down here is the cool part. You can say, just show me the ones in PDF. Some of them might be in Word too, if people wrote them in Word, but I usually have good luck with PDFs. And then you can see it only brings back links that are PDFs. So if I would have put in a movie name. Okay, so make sure you study how to write a script. I taught music for 8 years back in the 90s, and I saw some guitar players and musicians that didn't want to learn how to write. They just said, oh, I'm being artistic, and just would play anything. So writing movies is a craft, just like woodworking or painting, playing an instrument. You have to learn how to do it. There's certain guidelines to writing a script. Like 120 pages, only a few characters and things like that. So make sure you study how to write a script. But then on the other hand, creating a script is an art. All these guidelines help, but just because you follow the guidelines, that doesn't mean you're going to create a good script. You have to use your imagination in a creative way to create that script. So I just wanted to make the distinction there. Sure, we have guidelines that we're supposed to follow, but as with any art, it's only a guideline, it's not a rule. Like if you were in science, you have rules. You have to do it this way, or it's not going to work. If you're fixing something on a car, it has to be done this way. There's no creative thing to it. But when you're creating a script, playing an instrument, it's a creative thing. How do we take words and sentences and create a fantastic movie? How does Led Zeppelin take a normal guitar, a normal musical scale, and create the music that they created? They bring it to another level They bring it to a higher level using their imagination to create their art. And sometimes they break the rules. Nothing wrong with breaking the rules after you know the rules. Okay? You can't just break the rules and say, "Oh, I never bothered to learn the rules, but I'm breaking them." That don't work. That's just being an idiot. First, you have to learn the rules. Then you're allowed to break them within reason, in a creative way. Okay? That's called being an artist. Big difference between being an artist and being an idiot. Okay? Okay, so blank page. You start writing, you're looking at a blank piece of paper. It's very tough to get started. We'll talk more about that later. But don't get stuck there. Don't say, "Oh, I'm in writer's block." Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. That's where you study it so much, you analyze it so much, you never sit down and write nothing. Both of these things, they're both real, but just try not to get stuck there. A good way not to get stuck is to use an outline. Just like we did in high school, we had to outline our book report, intro, body, conclusion. It's a nice way to get started. And we'll talk more about how to create an outline later on. Some good news is I've read that first-time writers, your first script, you can make $400,000 if they like it, if they like your topic. Even if it's not finished, they'll still buy it. Be sure to copyright your script before you ship it out. There's only so many topics. There's going to be a lot of similar movies. Just like songs, there's a lot of similar songs. There's only so many notes. There's only so many ways you can arrange your notes. There's only so many ways you can arrange a story. So things are going to be similar. So you should copyright your script to prove that you wrote it. And we'll talk more about that later. So once a script is done, what do you do with it? Right? You get an agent. You get an agent to shop your script. The agent contacts the movie companies. You as an artist, you really shouldn't contact the movie companies. It's the same type of thing with the songwriting business. Usually the record companies don't want to deal with the artist because they realize artists are creative people and they might be somewhat strange to deal with, artists. So the record companies only want to deal with the agents or the lawyers. And it's the same thing here. Get an agent to shop your script. Some entertainment lawyers will also shop your script. And of course, there's always a fee. High-priced lawyers could easily cost $400 or more. But they'll help you get in the door. Another thing is build a team. You want a manager, agent, an accountant, lawyer. Build a business around your script writing. Sure, at first, before you start making money, writing scripts, it may be kind of hard, but that's something that you should be working towards. So where do you find that type of thing? There's a book called Writer's Market, and it has all types of names and addresses. We'll talk more about that later. So with all that being said, don't overwrite. You're creating characters, you're creating a story, you're creating dialogue between a couple characters. Don't overwrite. Don't fill in all the background stuff. They're sitting at a brown table and there's a picture on the wall of a monkey, stuff like that. That's the director's job. I've actually read some directors take offense to that if you put too much direction in, because that's what they're paid for. That's what they do. They take your script and mold it into a movie.